My name is Nicole Nussbaum. Nikki, let you know that I'm a lawyer. I've got some experience in transhuman rights, employment, and family law. I'm the president-elect of the Canadian Professional Association for Transgender Health. That's CPAP, cpap.ca. I would encourage you all to, CPAP is an interdisciplinary professional organization committed to improving access to care and improving the lives of trans folks in Canada, and supporting professionals who provide assistance to trans and gender diverse folks. Looking at this room, I'm just so impressed by how far things have come, how much has improved, and also daunted by how much more work has to be done to get trans and gender independent youth the acceptance that they need and the accessibility that they require for education and all the other services and expectations that we have for all of our youth. I just want to discuss briefly why this conference and this work is so important. TransPulse, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the TransPulse project. It's a research project here in Ontario. Full disclosure, the principal investigator on that project is married to me. Her name's Dr. Greta Bauer. They surveyed 433 trans people in Ontario, of whom a number were youth, and they recently released some statistics about the impact of strong parental support on positive life and health conditions and suicidality amongst trans youth ages 16 to 24. And the results, you may be aware that suicidal ideation and suicide rates among trans folks are elevated I mean, it's tragic. The numbers are tragic and mind-boggling. What TransPulse found was that strong parental support was very positively associated with youth's ratings of their life satisfaction, their physical and mental health, their self-esteem. It had a huge impact on whether or not they were adequately housed. Of the respondents, 100% of trans youth with strong parental support were adequately housed, and 45% of trans youth with less, somewhat supportive or unsupportive parents were not adequately housed, right? In terms of mental health, 70% of trans youth with strong parental support rated their mental health as very good or excellent, compared to 15% of trans youth who did not have that kind of parental support. In terms of depressive symptoms and suicidality, they found that 75% of people, 23% of people with strong parental support had depressive symptoms, whereas 75% of trans youth without strongly supportive parents had depressive symptoms. And in terms of suicidal attempts in the past year, 57% of trans youth in Ontario who don't have strong parental support have attempted suicide in the past year, versus 4% of kids and youth who have strong parental support. So these issues are sort of life and death issues, and the support issues are life and death issues. And, you know, this study looked at parental support, but if you look at systemic support in the school systems, you know, that also plays, I would suggest, a major role in how well a kid can do. You know, the National Transgender Discrimination Survey in the US also showed that the risk for ever having attempted suicide increased if students had been bullied, harassed, assaulted, or expelled because they were transgender or gender nonconforming. It went up with people who were the survivors of physical assault, and even higher for youth who were survivors of sexual assault. And actually, the most shocking statistic from that study was that there was a much greater risk if that abuse came from people in authority positions. So 59% of those who had been harassed or bullied by teachers had attempted suicide. 76% among those who were physically assaulted by teachers, and 69% amongst those who were sexually assaulted by teachers. These are suicide attempts. And these numbers are incomprehensible. Additionally, Alex Abramovich, who's done a lot of work on LGBT youth homelessness, estimates that 25 to 40% of homeless youth identify as LGBTQ, and only approximately 5 to 10% of the population identifies that way. So there's a huge overrepresentation of LGBT youth and trans youth experiencing homelessness. And there are issues with shelters and all of that as well, and we can talk more about that. That is why this work is so important. But there's been a lot of very good work that has been done. The work of the people sitting at this table, the work of the people that will be presenting to you later in the day and earlier. We recently passed Toby's Law in Ontario, which adds gender identity and gender expression to the Ontario Human Rights Code. That leaves us with 4 provincial jurisdictions: Northwest Territories, Nova Scotia, Manitoba, that have gender identity or gender expression protections that are explicit. Historically, protection for trans folks has been found under the grant of sex, and that's been very clear, but the explicit protections sends that message that trans folks will be afforded the rights of everyone else. I'll just make one point in closing. Just discussing erasure, and this is something that Vivian Namaste and Transpulse have talked about. When you don't have policies and formal recognition of trans folks, or anybody in general, you get a reinforcing cycle. So if you don't have a trans-positive, a trans-inclusive policy in your school or in your institution, you're not going to get people to self-identify and come out and let you know that that they're there and that you have to service their needs, right? And when you don't see anybody because they haven't represented themselves to you, they haven't come out, they haven't made themselves known, you're going to think that there's no need for this, right? So just making policies clear, promulgating the issues, discussing the issues, bringing it out into the open is a tremendously important thing. Thank you very much.